So today I want to go over a question that I answered in my Packers mailbag in my newsletter earlier today because I thought it was an interesting question to go over. And if you haven't read the newsletter, I'll leave a link in the description down below. I answer many different questions you guys asked me here on YouTube. But let me start here by reading this question by Philip John Cass 9085. He says this: thoughts on the Packers trading players? D-Bach, David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, Preston Smith, Devondre Campbell, and maybe even Rasul. I wouldn't be surprised if before the season, one of them gets moved, and almost definitely by the trade deadline if the Packers have a losing record. So I think right now at this point of the offseason, the fact that we're only a month away from the season starting August 8th, I just find it hard to believe that the Packers would make that kind of trade at this time. I think that they've sort of moved on from the guys they wanted to move on to and have held on to the guys that they want to hold on to, and some of the, I'd say, veteran pieces they want to keep around here with Jordan Love in his first season as starter. And so I think if they would have made a move, trading away David Bakhtiari, they would have done it by now. And I saw on Twitter in the past couple of days, Ken Ingles, who sort of covers this Packers salary cap, mentioned that the Packers probably would have traded him before they had to give him a $15 million bonus back in either March or April. So I think that trading Bakhtiari right now wouldn't make the most sense. Maybe, as you mentioned, with the trade deadline, whenever it does come up, I think it's October 31st this season. If the Packers are absolutely atrocious, let's say, I think at that point there'll be 8 games. If they're like 1-8, or no, 1-7, maybe at that point you trade someone. The odds of that happening, I don't think they're crazy high. And even if the Packers were 4-4, 3-5, you never know what could happen over the final stretch of the season. So overall, I think when you look at some of these guys, which I'll go by and sort of discuss each of them by themselves and also look at potential trades after the season, I think right now the Packers want all the guys they have. Starting off with Bakhtiari, there are some, I'm slightly concerned about Bakhtiari just because the Packers have been holding him out of lots of practices. They're sort of making it sound like it's not an issue, and maybe it's not an issue at all. They just want to make sure he's completely healthy. But considering he had so many complications with that knee the past season and the past season basically, I do wonder if that's going to be a problem at all this season. Hopefully it's not. And the Packers seem to be doing everything they can to make sure he doesn't have any more of those knee issues, and so they're holding him out of lots of practices, which at least shows me that they think there's maybe, he's safe for obviously not practicing, and maybe because he is a veteran player who doesn't really need reps, they just don't want to risk anything. That could be why. Maybe he's completely fine. But the important thing to note is last season when he was healthy, he was still playing as one of the best left tackles in the NFL. If we look at PFF, they graded him as the 12th best overall left tackle in the NFL, and he had the 5th highest pass blocking grade in the NFL. So considering the Packers have a young Jordan Love entering his first season as starter, barely any playing time under his belt, to have a guy on the left side protecting his blind side is vitally important, and to be able to have one of the best in the league there, I think is huge for Jordan Love in his first season. So I think to trade Bakhtiari right now would be a very bad idea. I do think, a guy like Josh Nijman could come in at left tackle and, be okay, but he's nowhere near the caliber of Bakhtiari. He's nowhere near being an elite level tackle like David Bakhtiari is. It does get more complicated after this season because next season, if we look at David Bakhtiari's 2024 cap hit, it's $40.5 million, which is way too high. And I remember Bakhtiari even mentioning in a interview early in the offseason that the Packers will likely need to either release him or restructure his contract. He will be 32 years old next offseason, so he is getting up there in age, but I'd say tackles oftentimes do last longer than your typical positions. But the Packers do have something to decide in the future going forward. Is he going to stay with the Packers in 2023 and 2024? Who knows? Because if the Packers do decide to cut him, I believe they'll save like $20 or $21 million in 2024. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I think especially for Jordan Love's first season, you got to keep Bakhtiari around here and just really solidify the left side of that line. Then the next guy you mentioned was Aaron Jones, who I think this is an interesting one right now because when you look at the running back position, there's so much uncertainty right now with the situation with Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. Lots of these running backs want to ensure that they get paid a ton of money. And nowadays, NFL teams, GMs aren't willing to pony up the kind of money they used to be with these running backs. And because of the franchise tag, teams are able to, keep the running back market somewhat low. Guys like Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley this offseason weren't able to become free agents to really see what they were worth. And so they're playing at like $10 or so million a year. And so when you look at Aaron Jones, he is 28 years old. He'll be 29 in, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 months. So by next season, he'll be 29 years old. And the sad reality for the running back position, and oftentimes every running back, is around the late 20s. There's usually some kind of cliff they fall off just because of the wear and tear on the body. I do think because of the Packers over the past few seasons, their willingness to split carries between, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, it's possible that Jones lasts longer than these workhorse backs just because they're not handing the ball off to him 300 times a year. They're sort of splitting it more, which has allowed, I think, Jones to last longer than running backs typically do, just because there's less wear and tear on his body. But there's no doubt that Jones has been one of the best running backs in the NFL. Last season, look at it, 6th in the NFL in yards per carry at 5.3 yards per carry. And if we look at his cap hit for 2023, it's honestly very manageable. Only an $8.1 million cap hit in 2023. So trading Jones doesn't make much sense, I think, right now. If you look at the dead cap money, if the Packers did trade Aaron Jones, this is per overthecap.com. If we traded him, according to Over the Cap, we'd have a $5.7 million dead cap hit. So we'd only save like $2.5 million. So I don't think it makes sense in 2023. If we do look at 2024, his cap hit jumps up to $17.17 million, which that's probably going to be an issue. And he will be 29 years old. So I do wonder how long Aaron Jones is going to be in Green Bay. And I think just from like a fan perspective and just as a person, he's like one of the best teammates I think you could possibly have. And I just wonder with the Packers front office if they're going to look to move off of him after this season and potentially go younger and cheaper running back. The thing is with that cap hit, there's just some question marks when it comes to how the Packers want to manage that and what their plan is at running back in the future. But right now, I still think that Bakhtiari Jones should stay on this team. Makes no sense to trade them at this point. And then Preston Smith, who you also mentioned, I think Preston Smith is a viable edge rusher right now. He did take a step back in 2022. If we look at 2021, he had 688 defensive snaps, 62 pressures, and 9 sacks. If you look at 2022, he had almost 150 more snaps, 825 total snaps with 42 pressures. So 20 less pressures, and he had more snaps. He did have one more sack in 2022, but overall, he was not as effective as a pass rusher. But I think when you look at the fact that Rashawn Gary, there is some uncertainty with him. How long will it take for him to get to his highest level at 100%? We did get the good news that he did come up off the PUP list, which is amazing news. And that sort of seems like that move to bring him off of there makes it sound like he's going to be ready sooner than I was expecting. It's even possible week 1. But still, guys recovering from ACLs, it's not usually right away they get back to their peak self. And so I think with that fact, we need to keep Preston Smith around here. Maybe after the offseason that changes, but right now, with that uncertainty with Rashawn Gary, I think Preston Smith's still a crucial piece on this defense. And then Devondre Campbell, he had a slightly down year compared to his first season in Green Bay in 2021. And the biggest area where he declined, if you look at PFF, he had an 82 run grade in 2021, and then last season he had a 60.3 run grade. So that was sort of an area where he took a dip, and I would expect him to be better in that capacity, in that area in 2023. And I think that when you look at some of these, the idea of trading a player, I think that when you look at the NFC, you look at the NFC North, I think the Packers are going to be in it for much of the season. Obviously, lots of it comes down to Jordan Love, his level of play. How good is he really going to be? But I think even with an average Jordan Love, if he plays as a mid-tier quarterback, which is basically how Aaron Rodgers played last season, the Packers could definitely be a wild card team. And with the uncertainty in the NFC North, you don't know if 10-7 record wins it, 11-6, however that math, 11-7, however that math adds up. I think that to trade a guy like Devondre Campbell, also not the best decision just because you don't have many pieces behind him that I'm as confident in. And then to end off with Rasul Douglas, he's been a very, very good corner here in Green Bay over the past couple seasons. And if you look at his passer rating allowed back in 2021, it was 43.7. Took a slight dip back in 2022, but still really good at 84. And I think with Eric Stokes' injury, we don't know when he'll be back. He still has yet to come off the PUP list. That injury does worry me still. and who knows when he'll be back. But Rasul and Jaire on the outside, I still think are one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL. And so the Packers, I think, need to keep Rasul around here. And so overall, as I said, I think that, right now, I don't think we should trade anyone. The Packers got rid of tons of veterans: Aaron Rodgers, Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan. Lots of these guys the Packers let go of, and they've brought in all this new talent, new tight ends, some new receivers. And Brian Gutekunst's idea is that he wants to get lots of these young players, especially on the offensive side of the ball, a lot more snaps. Guys like Luke Musgrave, guys like Tucker Kraft, who are entering their first years. He didn't want to have guys like Mercedes Lewis and Robert Tonyan, even though serviceable when it comes to blocking, I would say. He didn't want those guys stealing the snaps from Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, who are going to get a ton of snaps. And because of that, they'll probably progress a lot faster than if there were some different veteran guys in here. So considering we already lost lots of those veterans, I think lots of the guys you mentioned who are sort of those veteran presences in Green Bay are just important, not only on the field play, but also in the locker room, the leadership ability. They have that experience. Guys like Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, Preston Smith, all these guys, know what it's like to be a Green Bay Packer, and they can sort of teach these younger guys the ropes. So I think as the Packers here right now, I think they're going to stay where they are. If they come to the trade deadline and we're absolutely terrible, maybe you think about trading one of these guys if you can get some good compensation back. But I think if you're still a middle-of-the-road team, you hold on and sort of see how the rest of the season goes. But those are my thoughts. As I said, if you want to read the rest of my answers to questions, I'll leave a link down below in the description and the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed, you want to stay up to date with all things Packers, feel free to subscribe. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.